When you're just starting off on baking, it's important to have all of your ingredients laid out to follow the recipe that's set before you. It's written that way for a reason, and that reason is it normally works that way. However, even when you follow the recipe, occasionally you're going to screw stuff up, sometimes repeatedly. Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of Baking Broke. Now, this is my third attempt at getting this video all the way done and have the product turn out somewhat decent. The past two attempts have gone badly, so let's just get to the recipe, stick to the basics, and work from there. With this series, Baking Broke, I do hope to bring you recipes using ingredients that you've probably already got in your pantry, in your cupboards, all the stuff that you should normally just have on hand. Today's recipe is a real simple one, with the exception of the lavender. There are so many different wonderful things about lavender. One, the way it looks. Two, definitely the way it smells. The aroma, the relaxation that you feel just inhaling the lavender. You can get lavender a lot of different places. Of course, probably order it online. Other than that, you've probably got an organic food shop somewhere in your area. Check them out. They've probably got dried lavender as well. If you don't have lavender, but you have all the other ingredients, by all means, make it without the lavender. It's still a great cookie. If you've never had shortbread, it's not quite as sweet as a sugar cookie. Definitely not as sweet as a sugar cookie. It's a very buttery type cookie. It's lower on the sugar content, so it's not quite as sweet as most. But it's a very basic cookie, and let's show you how to make it without further ado. For this shortbread recipe, you're going to need 3½ cups flour, 3 sticks butter, 1 cup of sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, 2 teaspoons of ground lavender, and a ½ teaspoon of salt if you feel like it. That one's completely optional. Put it in, leave it out, it's your call. Now, what we've got here is a French term called mise en place. It means everything in its place. I've got all of the ingredients sorted out into exactly the right portions and all prepared before I even begin baking. We're adding the sugar to the butter. And normally this is the point at which I'd add the lavender. Getting all that mixed up, making sure not to knock over the vanilla that we've got over there. Now, mise en place isn't just about the ingredients, it's about having the tools ready as well. I'd forgotten my spatula, but I had it nearby. Let's get that all mixed out. Add the vanilla. We don't want to over blend this one though. That's good. Now we're adding dry into the wet. And for the flour, add about 1/3 of it to start off with. Thereabouts. After 2 failed attempts at this video, I decided I was going to go all Julia Childs with this recipe and do a real-time cooking video. In my haste to try to make it as short as possible, I blended everything a bit quicker and a bit too thoroughly on this one. Now once I get it down to a certain consistency, I like going in with the hands, otherwise it's just going to turn into loose, granular, sandy type of stuff. Yeah, so current consistency, loose, granular, sandy type of stuff. So sad. I tried quite a few things to be able to bring this dough back to a workable consistency. Tried adding some oil to it to moisten it up a bit, tried beating it, quite literally took my fist to it, but nothing wound up helping it to a point that it was back to where the shortbread should have been. Well, that's not really what it's supposed to look like. But let's see how this goes. Spoiler alert, yeah, it didn't go great. Alright, so 3 strikes, I'm out. Things in cooking don't always go as you plan. You might think that you've got this recipe down, that everything's copacetic, and, well, obviously doesn't turn out to be the case. I'd say this holds true for life as well. There are plenty of times where we have opportunities to try to overcome challenges. If we take a sense of humor with us throughout the day, throughout the recipes that we try, if it was my mistake, then I know better for next time. If it was something outside of my control, either I can try to prepare for it for next time, or I can appreciate that it's outside of my control, and I can't get stressed over that. So the third time ended with the sandy consistency. What happened on the other 2? Well, for the first one, it actually had a cute little skit at the beginning. Moving into the recipe, I was very happy with the camera angle that I'd set up. But I was shooting from the hip. I was measuring ingredients as I went along, which might not have been an issue, except for I had decided I didn't want to use the electric mixer. I tried using the spatula with little success. So I figure I was alright with getting my hands dirty. Let's dig right in. Once again, would not have been an issue had I measured out everything in advance. But I eyeballed it, I said, yeah, that looks like about 3.5 cups. It was nowhere near 3.5 cups. And I thought to myself, I can do better than that. I can do a more accurate video for you folks at home. And I decided I'd give it a second attempt, where I thought it was important that we talk about a French term, mise en place, meaning everything in its place. And in culinary terms, we are referring to having all of our ingredients prepped, portioned, peeled, prepared for our pursuit of perfection of pastries. Okay, we're not technically making pastries, but I was on a kick there, so. I don't always use mise en place, at least not as often as I probably should. But not using mise en place can end you up in trouble. Like I said, you might have to throw out your entire batter just because you screwed up one ingredient that you're adding. And in part 2, I screwed up one ingredient I was adding. Presented on the screen is the shortbread recipe that we're using for this episode. Now look at it quick, it's fairly short, memorize it, and now I'm going to take it away, and I want you to take a look at the picture on the screen of the ingredients I used for this one and find the one ingredient that probably should not have gone into this recipe. Now if you said the eggs, you're absolutely correct. Shortbread cookies are actually vegetarian. And that was how I screwed up part 2. We've all seen how we screwed up the third attempt and turned it into that granular stuff. But I promise you these have turned out well in the past. And I have confidence in your ability to make them even better than I tried to. So let's say that your dough turns out perfectly well. So what do you do next? Just like we tried to salvage the cookies that we had, we're going to try and salvage the video that we've shot. First thing, after we've made our dough, we'll lay out some parchment paper onto some baking trays. If you don't have parchment paper, don't worry about it. It's not necessary, it just makes cleanup a little easier. And if you don't have baking trays, you need to go buy some baking trays. Flatten out your dough into a fairly square shape, similar to what we did in the biscotti episode. But rather than a 1/2 inch thick, we'll go with about a 1/4 inch thick for this dough. Take your cutting instrument and divide the dough into fairly equal squares. Then separate those squares to give them all a little bit of baking room. After you've got them separated, put the baking sheets into the refrigerator for about an hour. This will let the butter firm back up a little and make for a more consistent bake. You'll have your oven preheated to 350 degrees and bake them for around 20 to 25 minutes at the most, I'd say. Rearranging the trays about midway through. And when they've got the proper amount of brownness for your personal taste, go ahead, remove them from the oven and allow them to cool. And even though none of the batches turned out perfect, they all found a very good home in my stomach. Well, it would seem that this is just a doomed episode. Out of 3 takes of a recipe that I've done time and time and time again in various forms, switching up ingredients, apparently I cannot make on camera. I hope you have better luck with this. The next recipe actually goes very well. I enjoyed making it, and it's been shot for a while. Yes, I shot these ones out of sequence. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. But at least all of this chaos that we've experienced for this episode has well prepared us for what's going to come up in next week's episode.
Dun 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 dun.
Next time, I bring to you the dark side of cooking. Of course, thanks for watching, and stick around for the next episode of Baking Broke. So that didn't go as well as it could have, but it could have gone a lot worse.